Weirding Way Media.
Welcome to episode 134 of the Filmumentaries Podcast. This is Jamie Benning, your host for the next hour or so. This time I'm speaking to James Kahn, the novelist behind some of the most well-known movie novelizations from the 1980s. You'll know his work if, like me, you grew up with well-thumbed copies of Return of the Jedi, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, The Goonies and Poltergeist on your bookshelf. For many of us, these books were the only way to revisit our favourite films before home video was widely available. So James's work left a real impression on fans at the time. In our conversation, James explains how an unexpected call while he was working as an ER doctor in Santa Monica led him directly onto the set of E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. He tells the story of being part of a group of doctors dressed in hazmat suits, helping bring E.T. back to life on the screen. That experience introduced him to Kathleen Kennedy and Steven Spielberg, which opened the door to his first big opportunity, writing the novelization for the currently in production at the time, Poltergeist. From there, things snowballed and Spielberg gave James an unusual level of creative freedom on these books, allowing him to flesh out characters, add backstories and bring a personal voice to the books. We discuss how some of those choices became part of fans' understanding of the stories, like Ben Kenobi and Owen Lars being brothers, something I still think is in my head more than the prequels these days, and James's inclusion of details about Anakin's duel in the lava pits years before the prequels ever existed. Those details, of course, from the Return of the Jedi novelization. We talk about the tight deadlines, the secrecy, a few surprises, including how the draft of the script James was given for Return of the Jedi had Luke Skywalker killing the Emperor. But maybe that was a decoy script that Lucas gave him. From there, we move through his other projects, including Temple of Doom, where he gave Short Round his own character backstory, and The Goonies, where he experimented with telling the story from Mikey's point of view after reading Huckleberry Finn. Throughout, James reflects on what makes a great novelization, not just retelling the screenplay word for word, but finding a space for extra character moments and emotional depth. And we also discuss his memoir, a Jedi memoir, A Double Life, which ties together his Hollywood career and his years in emergency medicine. Before we dive in, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, I'd really, really appreciate it if you'd consider supporting the podcast on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Jamie Benning. This is an independent show, completely independent, and it takes time, resources, and everything else to put these episodes together. It is just me. I'm booking the guests, I'm doing the research, I'm doing the interviews, I'm editing them, I'm doing the social media, I'm doing the artwork, if you can call it artwork. If you find value in what I do, then please become a patron. It's one of the best ways you can make sure I keep talking to fascinating guests like James. As I said, you can sign up at patreon.com/Jamie Benning, JamieBenning. Okay, here's my conversation with movie novelization author James Kahn, and I'll be back at the end for a bit more jabbering on. James, thanks so much for joining me. We finally got around to doing this. I know I let you down a few times, but we finally got there.
Life intervenes.
It does. Tell me, how did this transition of yours happen from one career to another, from being in the medical profession to being a novelist for movie books?
Yeah, it was a very unique kind of entry. I'm an emergency room physician. I was working in an emergency room in a hospital in L.A., in Santa Monica, actually. And one day we got a call from a woman asking if anyone down there could help her figure out how to resuscitate an alien. So I wasn't there at the moment. The call was taken by another doc there at the time, and he said, sure, we can do that. Why don't you come on down tomorrow and we'll show you how it's done. So then he got me involved as well as the head of the ER, because he knew I had a love of wanting to be in the movies. And it was Kathleen Kennedy, and she came down to the ER with Melissa Matheson, who had written E.T. And they were filming E.T., and we gave them a demonstration, and I was the corpse, I was E.T., and they pounded on my chest, and they were impressed enough. They said, okay, you're hired for no money. It was a volunteer gig. And we showed up, the three of us and a couple more doctors and a number of nurses from the St. John's ER went down to Laird Studios Monday morning where they were filming. Laird Studios is a satellite of MGM at that time. Mm. It's where they filmed Gone with the Wind back in the day. So it was exciting to be there. And so they dressed us all up in hazmat suits, and we were the doctors in that big tent resuscitating E.T. So, we all had a hand in pumping on his chest. And if you watch the movie again at some point, there's a point where alarm bells go off because his heart has just stopped.
That's
and
right,
five doctors run into the tent, and I'm the fifth doctor holding a clipboard.
But you said you were a big fan already of movies, so you're aware of the kind of magnitude of a new Steven Spielberg picture.
Oh, yeah. And I was always a great fan and always wanted to somehow insert myself into the movie-making process. I had actually written one screenplay at that point, a sort of semi-autobiographical thing based on my experience in the emergency room.
Right.
So, and that got me an agent actually, and some interest, although no one actually bought it. But I was at that point still trying to get in the door somehow.
Mm. Was that just born out of a dissatisfaction of the job that you had found yourself in?
No. At that point, eventually I was dissatisfied with the job, but at that point it was very exciting. It was like commando medicine. I'd always wanted to be a sorcerer. From my childhood, reading fantastic tales and strange worlds, comic books, and being an emergency room doctor felt very close to that, where people would be brought in to me dead, essentially, and I would pull them back to life. It was a very wizardly kind of occupation.
Yeah, nice. And so you find yourself on set there for the moments when E.T. is after E.T. is found by the stream there, and he's white and he's fading, and all of that. How do you then go from being essentially an extra in that scene? I assume it was a few days' work, was it, or free work?
It was meant to be a week's work.
Yeah.
And
but then
how
did you go? Go on.
I was going to say we were also involved in initially rewriting the scene a little bit. They asked us to fill in, realistic dialogue. He wanted it to be as realistic as possible. And eventually, except for the spoken lines by the key characters, he asked us to just ad-lib as if we were actually carrying on a resuscitation. So, we're shouting out an amp of epi and charge the paddles up to 200, as if an amp of epinephrine would do anything for a space alien. But we went through the motions like that.
Yeah, it is quite a sort of alarming scene, that one, isn't it? Especially for kids. I mean, I was only, 7 or 8 when that came out, and
it's very intense.
And I remember being quite upset at that point, like what is happening? Because it does have that feeling of being in a hospital where you're relinquishing your trust for a moment to these professionals without really having the knowledge of what is really going on.
Yeah, and then for a little kid, it's like, is E.T. dying? What's going on? It was, and then he did die for a moment. Yeah. It was very, very moving and sad and intense, I thought.
Yeah, it makes that bond all the stronger, doesn't it?
Yeah. And watching Spielberg direct that scene was really remarkable too. He turned into at some points into a child himself. He would get down on his haunches so he could be eye to eye with the kids in the scene and talk to them like they were okay, okay, imagine now your best friend has just come from outer space and all these guys are coming in and you don't know what they're doing to him. It's just like kids talk to each other when they're making up games, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He does really seem to have that ability to pull those performances out of kids.
Yeah,
Young
yeah,
Henry
yeah.
Thomas was quite a performer. I mean, I've seen, I'm sure you've seen it as well, that audition tape where he's just
Yeah, oh, it's
screaming and it's like,
unbelievable.
kid, you got the
You
job.
got
Yeah.
the job, kid. Yeah.
Yeah. But then how do you leap from there to writing
Yes.
novels in the
So,
movies?
so, well, at that point, I had already written a couple original novels of my own.
Right.
I'd written a murder mystery called Diagnosis Murder,
Mm-hmm.
published by a now defunct, I think, small press.
Mm.
And I'd written a much larger novel called World Enough and Time, which was a sci-fi fantasy novel
Mm.
published by Del Rey,
Oh,
which
right.
was a big imprint
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
time.
definitely.
And I got to know actually after she bought the book, she was in New York, I was in L.A., but she was going to be out in L.A. and we said, well, let's get to meet each other. So we had basically tentatively scheduled a meeting, and then she had to cancel at the last minute. She was staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel because she had a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. So I said, no problem. And I got someone to take over a couple hours of my shift. And I went over to the Beverly Hills Hotel with all my tools to stop nosebleeds. And I fixed her up and we had our meeting in her hotel room.
Oh, wow. It's
So
amazing,
anyway,
isn't it? These moments of sort of, sliding doors almost, isn't it? If it
yeah,
had gone
yeah,
the other
very
way.
much,
Yeah,
very much.
yeah.
So I had this sci-fi fantasy novel published, and
Mm.
I thought, okay, well, this is the only time in my life I'm ever gonna be in contact with Steven Spielberg, and I was extremely nervous, and how did I have the nerve to even think about doing this? But if I didn't do it now, it was never gonna happen. So I cornered him in his office between takes. They were doing
Mm.
another setup, and I had brought my book with me, a little paperback. It's actually now that I think of it, it's right here.
There it is. Old enough and time.
And
Cool.
my wife Jill Littlewood did the silhouette illustration.
Yeah, that's a cool.
So I said, Mr. Spielberg, this must happen to you all the time, but I have this book I've published with Del Rey, and it's a sci-fi fantasy. I wonder if you'd ever consider making it into a movie. And he was very gracious and took it and said, well, I'm really busy right now, obviously, but I'll put it on my shelf. And someday when I get time, I'll take a look at it. And I promise. So thank you very much. And, I felt like at that point, nothing was going to happen, but I at least had bragging rights that Steven Spielberg took my book. But the next day, a PA ran up and said, Mr. Spielberg wants to see you in his office.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, what did I do wrong? But I went there and he said he read some of it and he liked it. I said, so you want to make it into a movie? He said, no. But he was behind the eight ball on Poltergeist, which was then in post-production. And they'd been having trouble with the novelization. And if I assured him that I could finish writing the novelization in 1 month, I could have the gig based on my writing sample, basically.
Wow.
I thought a month, I'm scheduled for a dozen shifts in the ER this month. How can I can't get out of those. And I don't even know what a novelization was at that point exactly. I had read that Graham Greene, after doing the movie The Third Man, liked how it came out so well that he wrote the novel from his own screenplay. So that was the first example of a novelization, I think.
Huh.
And I loved both the movie and his book. So I thought, well, I could do that. So I thought, I'm sure I can find people to take over at least some of my shifts. So I said on the spot, I can do it.
And were you given the script at that point to work from, or any dailies to watch or anything?
No dailies. The first thing I did was go back and get all my friends to cover all my shifts in the hospital that month. Then that afternoon, they messengered me the final script, the shooting script, and an envelope full of about 30 production stills, pictures of all the characters of the beast, just so I knew how to describe the people and what was going on, photos of the set so I could accurately describe the movement that was happening, and the script, and that's all I had. And they ensconced me in his Spielberg's conference room at MGM. There's a big conference table surrounded by about 20 old school video games. Missile Command and Donkey Kong and Centipede and because he was a big game player.
Yeah.
And so I sat there. I didn't have a computer at that time. I had a notebook, a spiral notebook, and a pen. So they also hired a secretary to transcribe everything I wrote on an IBM Selectric typewriter. Because I'm not sure computers were even used at that point, or maybe just very, very
word
slightly.
processing hadn't arrived quite.
Yeah. So, and I remember the IBM Selectrics very well. These little balls that spun around. And,
that's right. Yeah.
And spewed letters on the page.
Yeah.
So she would come in. I would write every day from 9 in the morning until 9 at night in this room, this dark room. There was one window facing on an alleyway, facing another building, and just write. And every couple of days, I would give her what I'd written the previous days, and she would go in another room and type it up. And that's how we did it. I did it in 26 days.
Wow.
And turned it. Actually, I did the first draft in about 2 weeks. I turned it in and asked if it's kind of short. My first drafts tend to be sort of skeleton outlines of the plot, and then for subsequent drafts, I infill with character development and internal monologue and backstory and relationships and things like that. So after I turned in the first draft, I asked Frank Marshall, who was producing, and who was my main liaison at that point, while Stephen was busy directing, if I could add additional material that wasn't in the script. So they read it and they liked my first draft a lot, and they said, "Go for it, write whatever you want."
Wow! So you had pretty much free reign then.
Total free reign in this one, and so I brought in a lot of material from my own personal experience doing ESP research in medical school, and I put that into Tangina's character and brought a lot of that information in and developed this whole otherworldly story that was going on in the astral plane, and it was really enjoyable. It made it much more like an original novel to me. It was, I was following their basic story structure and plot structure, but creating a whole world that was my own world.
Yeah, because I guess a typical movie script is like, 90, 120 pages maybe.
Yeah, 110, yeah.
Yeah, when you've got it in a novelization form like this, I mean, did you have a word target, like word count target?
Not at all. I just wrote until it felt like it was done.
Right, yeah.
And, and Poltergeist came out actually much thicker than some of my subsequent novelizations. I think because I brought in all this extra material.
And was that released before the film came out or at the same time?
Generally the same day. Sometimes I'll release the book a few days earlier as a marketing to gin up excitement about the movie. But I think, as I recall, these were released at the same time, probably because they were on such a tight time crunch.
Yeah. And did that lead straight into Return of the Jedi then? Was that the next thing that happened? Or
Yeah. Then just, right place at the right time kind of thing. Right as that was finishing, George Lucas called his buddy Steve and said, I'm just wrapping up principal photography on Return of the Jedi. You know anybody who could write a novelization for it? And so, Spielberg really loved the Poltergeist novelization, and he highly recommended it. And then the additional kicker was Jedi was being published by Del Rey. So my publisher, Judy Lynn Del Rey, also gave Lucas a high recommendation for me. So that happened almost just seamlessly. They offered it. I said yes. Same deal. I didn't see any actual screening of the film. They were still in the last days of filming principal photography and pickup shots and things. So they sent me the script and a bunch of slides and photos from the shoot that I used to. And by that time I was already familiar with who the characters were from the earlier film.
Yeah. And did you read? It was Alan Dean Foster that did the original Star Wars in under George's name, I think, and then it was
Yeah.
Donald Glut,
Donald
wasn't it?
Glutz, right?
Yeah, who did Empire? Did you read those to sort of get
I didn't.
yourself
I
into the
didn't.
world?
I started. I didn't want
They do
to.
feel different, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I wanted to just make this my own thing and not try to conform into a pattern of what had gone before.
Mm. And I remember like reading this book as a kid and kind of being blown away by those extra details about, Owen being Ben's brother and Anakin's fall
Yeah,
into the molten pit. All of that stuff was in my head for 20, what was it, 83 to 99, however long that is.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
the stuff I expected to be happening. So was that stuff that was fed to you? Was that stuff you came up with yourself?
But both the stuff about Owen's brother and Obi-Wan was just made up out of whole cloth by me. Just because I had a sense. I think even when, well, I don't know when, but I had a sense they were brothers, antagonistic brothers, and in my mind, I made up this whole backstory between them that Obi-Wan was the older brother and he was restless and he wanted to be a Jedi, but his father wanted him to take over the farm. Uh, and but he left and there was a lot of rancor and family acrimony. And he was told never to come back. He had a big fight with his brother who wanted him to stay, and his brother Owen said, "Don't ever come back here. If you leave now, don't come back." Um, and then he did come back, obviously with the infant Luke, and asked if they would care for him. And my thought was still that Owen said, "No, I told you to never come back." But Beru had always wanted children of her own, and she prevailed upon her husband to take Luke in.
Yeah. It makes sense. It really does make sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But Owen trying to exert some kind of control said at least, all right, but never come back to this farm. And so, Obi-Wan just stayed in seclusion, hermit-like in the elsewhere on the planet, kind of looking over Luke from afar, making sure nothing bad happened to him.
Mm.
So that was all my backstory and my invention. The the lava pits, I only got a single word from George saying, I asked him at one point, so what was the deal? How did this happen with Darth? And he said, well, I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work out, but they had a big laser fight duel on this planet where there was lava flowing and Darth was almost killed and mutilated and left to become bionic.
Hmm. And it's funny how, like, obviously in the prequels, some of that was undone, not the Molten bit, but the Owen and Ben being brothers bit. I was fully expecting that to be, I thought it was, canon wasn't a term fans used
Right.
back then
Yeah.
particularly, but I was convinced that's what was going to transpire. And you can still buy the novel today in like anthology form or separate, but it's still got all of that stuff in there. I wonder why they've never kind of weighed in and removed bits and
Yeah, I think they must have liked it.
yeah.
Read it and said, yeah, that's kind of, I believe that. Let's keep that in.
Yeah. I just think of that scene at the table, that wizard's just a crazy old man and, stay away from him, essentially. It does feel like a family
It feels
fight,
like a
doesn't
family
it?
thing, does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Things like what you'd say at a Thanksgiving dinner, or
Yeah.
with your extended family and your crazy uncle who you hate.
Yeah. And
There are other things that I put in that they did cut out. The biggest one was somewhat not a real extended scene, but went on a couple pages of Princess Leia when she's in captivity with Jabba the Hutt, thinking to herself, well, I can make it through this if I made it through being tortured by Darth Vader.
right.
And then she has a long memory about what that torture was like, of being mind probed by those robots, and it was a pretty intense scene. And I think the editor or whoever was in charge of going through all that must have thought, well, he's her father. That's pretty creepy to think about a father doing that to a daughter. And maybe that's an image we don't want in people's minds.
Yeah, and I think all of this, the story we're telling here in a way is that, the creative pursuit of creating the trilogy was an ongoing thing. It was a
Yeah,
malleable thing. It wasn't all
absolutely.
completely set in George's mind. Maybe the big brushstrokes were, but the
Right, right,
minutiae
right.
was not.
No, I
Um,
know, which is it doesn't amuse me exactly, but it bemuses me a little bit how intensely fans follow canon and
mm,
insist on canon and
yeah,
and go crazy sometimes if something there's arguments about what is canon, what isn't canon. But you're right, it's a very malleable
yeah.
creative process.
Yeah, well, I was never a fan of the prequels. I was too there was too much expectation for me, and I was kind of my expectations were not met. Having read things like this and imagined for 15 years,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
that might be like, and
yeah. I think a lot of
I'm
us were disappointed in this.
yeah, and I'm still in the position where I haven't really watched or revisited those films. So in my mind, this book still exists, the comics still
Um,
exist, the games still
yeah,
exist, all of that stuff, which is just this kind of what if.
yeah,
Doesn't have to be rigid and it doesn't have to be
right.
precise. I like the idea that it's a bit more loose and a bit more malleable, as I said.
Yeah,
Um, I hear the book was it the best-selling novel of 1983 or one of the best-selling
it
novels?
was the best-selling novel. Yeah, it was
Wow.
number one on the bestseller list, New York Times bestseller list for months and months and months.
And I mean, the expectation on that movie was massive, of course. It had been, 6 years, hadn't it? And it was to be the final chapter for now, at least. Did you feel that pressure when you were writing it?
Oh yeah, first I felt like stunned, like I'm going to be part of this. How did this? How did I get so lucky? And there was intense secrecy around it. I
Yeah.
signed non-disclosure state documents all day and night, just to make sure that I wasn't going to disclose anything. There's a lot of pressure, and in fact, one interesting story is the script that I was given. In that script, um, Luke is the one who kills the Emperor, not Darth
Mm.
Vader,
Mm.
and that's how I wrote it in the novelization I submitted. And when I got it back to see that Darth Vader had actually done it, I was surprised. And when I saw George at it was the Fourth of July party up on Skywalker Ranch after the release, I said, "What was up with that? Did you change your mind at the last minute, or?" Uh, and he said, "No, I always knew who was going to kill the emperor," and I think he must have put in fake plot twists in various scripts he gave to various people had to see it in order to do their jobs, so that if they were going to reveal something, they would
Yeah.
reveal the wrong thing.
Kind of muddied the water a bit because I think on Empire, I think the line that Dave Prowse delivered was Obi-Wan was your father to Luke.
Yeah, yeah,
On set, and of course they overdubbed it later on with James Earl Jones. Yeah, he's canny individual.
yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
hasn't got to where he's got by being not being
Exactly.
prepared. Um, yeah, I've interviewed a bunch of people that worked on that movie, and I interviewed the editor, one of the editors, Sean Barton, as well, who's based here in London, and they talk about the film having quite a few deleted scenes actually, and I think they've been published over the years on Blu-rays and things. Were they included in the novel from memory, like the scenes where Darth Vader's still going around choking every other officer that comes in his path? I haven't read it for
Uh,
a little while now.
yeah, no, I haven't read it for a little while myself, but no, I don't remember that being
Mm,
part of the
mm.
script or the novelization.
How did you sort of go about kind of working out the Ewoks as well? Because they were the kind of secret at the time, weren't they? I remember they weren't kind of revealed till late on. Just from a few stills, presumably you had, or maybe even some of the sketches, or
Yeah, yeah, I had a couple sketches and a few stills, um, and there's another thing that was deleted a little bit is that they looked so much like Wookiees to me, like baby cousins of Wookiees,
mm,
that I included that as a piece of backstory that there was an ancestral relationship uh, that I went to at some length, which they mostly took out, but there's still one line left in there about some possible ancestral back in the day, a shared genetics that diverged, and one group speciated into Wookiees and the other into
mm.
Ewoks.
Which is fun because from a creative point of view, from George's point of view, there is a connection between them because he wanted them to be Wookiees, and then he'd already established Chewbacca as technical and can fly a spaceship and all of that stuff.
Right.
And that's why he went for Ewoks. So they did sort of appear out of each other.
Yeah. But they wanted in the draft, they wanted to downplay that.
Yeah, sure. And then the other book I've read of yours, and I still have my childhood copy here in front of me, is Temple of Doom. So did Spielberg just sort of come back to you by default, or did you have to pitch for it? Or
yeah, no, I didn't pitch. I
out?
was their sort of go-to guy at that point. I had turned in every novelization in under a month, so I was. Someone once said I was faster than anyone, better, and better than anyone, faster.
That's great.
So yeah, they just, whenever they needed a novelization, they just automatically came to me for that, and for the Goonies, and for Poltergeist 2, although that wasn't strictly speaking a Spielberg production. And they even came back to me. They came back to me and asked me to do the novelization for the next Indiana Jones. I think it was The Last Crusade.
Last Crusade, yeah.
At that point, I was a head writer on a TV show. By now, the novelizations had given me entree into the greater universe of Hollywood. So I started writing spec scripts and pitching myself, and I got a job being a writer for a medical show, basically.
Oh, cool. What was the show?
It was called Family Medical Center, and it was a syndicated, what was called a strip show, which just meant it was a 30-minute show that played 5 days a week consecutively.
Right, yeah, okay.
And it was produced to go opposite, at that time, Johnny Carson, the late night show, to be a sort of an alternative for people who were tired of watching late night. But it was an exhausting job. I wrote all or part of 167 scripts that year. So I had no, time, energy, or bandwidth to write another novelization, and regretfully turned it down. And then after that, they didn't ask anymore.
You mentioned with Poltergeist that you sort of had the opportunity to flesh things out. And from memory, Temple of Doom, you flesh out the backstories of Short Round and Willie quite a bit. And it's a dark film, but it gets quite dark at points. And sort of more graphic in spots as well.
Yeah. And again, the ones I did for Spielberg, he gave me a free license to do whatever I wanted. He liked the ways I went. And that I did go dark there, and it felt like a dark film to me. And I did, and I love the character Short Round. So I gave him a whole chapter about his backstory and his life. I think it was like a day in the life of Short Round leading up to the moment he met Indy.
Right. Yeah.
And that chapter, I titled the chapter "A Boy's Life." It's about Short Round, but that was a little Easter egg inside joke for us, because the working title for E.T. was A Boy's Life.
That's right.
And that was, I think, because Spielberg saw that movie as largely autobiographical, that he was the kid in that film who'd always been hoping for a space alien to come down.
Yeah, and he's doing another movie with an alien or aliens at the moment, I believe, Spielberg.
Is he?
His picture, yeah. With the Goonies, I think that book came out before the film, because I remember a friend at school that had an American cousin. Maybe it came out before it came out here in the UK. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
But there, of course, with the scenes with the octopus. And there's a few bits of different dialogue, different exchanges. You get sort of a different impression of the characters in that as well.
Yeah. The octopus stuff was in the script that I got, just cut out of the final movie because apparently the footage was so ridiculous looking.
Yeah, I think it has been seen now and again, like at conventions and things. But I've never seen it myself.
Yeah. But for the Goonies, I prepared myself by reading Huckleberry Finn.
Oh, right.
By Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like a similar kinds of, at least subtext and theme, and it was first-person narrative spoken by the the young boy who was going on this adventure, talking about this, amazing adventure that had happened to him. And in Huck Finn, it was an adventure down the river, and in the Goonies, it was an adventure under the caverns, under the city. And it felt like that's the way I wanted to do it. So I kind of patterned the speech pattern and the sensibility on Huck. And I wanted it to have the feel as if Mikey was telling this story to a friend years later about this amazing thing that happened to him when he was a kid. So I wanted it to have a sort of casual and yet intimate feel about the prose. So, it starts out saying, so my name is Mikey Walsh. So, maybe this is a guy he just met in the bar and he's sitting with. He says, so my name is Mikey Walsh, and here's my story. And it's kind of the way a kid or an older kid talks, and kind of reminiscing on this amazing thing and kind of contemplating how it affected his life and how he got here.
Yeah, you take sort of full advantage of what the medium of writing offers. It's not just plastering in the screenplay and working around it. I mean, maybe that's how you began, and you were kind of fleshing things out in the early stuff. But by this one, it does feel like it does have a different feel to it. It feels kind of very self-contained.
Yeah, and from the beginning, I wanted it to be from Mikey's POV. That presented some problems because there were parts of the film that he didn't know about, that he wasn't involved in. With, was it Chunk, who got kidnapped by the bad guys? But I found a way to solve that by having, there's one chapter where they reunite with Chunk, and he says, and this is what Chunk told me happened to him.
Yeah. Yeah, because the film is like full of, it's just pure on-screen energy. I mean, it was like wrangling
non-stop
cats from what I hear, shouting kids, overlapping dialogue and gags. And, it feels kind of breathless and chaotic, doesn't it?
Exactly. And I had to find places, I wanted to find places in the novel to put a pause on that and to stop the reckless abandon and say, okay, this is a time for, sort of going over what we've been through, worrying about what's coming next. There was the one I remember was when they're in the caves and they slide down this sort of water chutes into a lake, and I had them floating on the lake for quite a while in the book. A dark lake, it was very dark, and each one of them has little monologues talking about something that this whole thing has brought up for them. His brother, I can't remember his brother's name now even, Josh Brolin in the movie.
Yeah, Josh Brolin in the movie, but I forgot his name.
Talks for becomes vulnerable and talks for the first time about his claustrophobia and how that came about. So,
by this time, this is what, an 84, 85, the Goonies, wasn't it? By this time, were you getting the chance to see any footage at any point, or were you still working from stills?
No, it was all from stills.
Yeah,
the one thing I was able to do with Goonies is the set was still up, so I got to go onto the pirate ship.
Oh, wow.
Where
was that?
It was on a soundstage at Warner Brothers, sitting in about, 2 feet of water.
Yeah, which by which point it was probably a bit stinky in there. That water.
Yeah,
for some
it
time.
was. I did not want to get in that water.
Yeah.
But the ship itself was really cool. It was, I believe, 7/8 scale, and everything was
camera trickery in there.
Yeah. Yeah. It was all laid out as you saw it in the movie, so it was very
that's cool.
exciting for me because I've always been a big movie fan.
Yeah. And with Poltergeist 2, because Spielberg, as you said, wasn't really connected to that as such. You were working presumably directly with Mark Victor and
Michael Grace.
Yeah. Did that change the kind of approvals process or your approach to expanding the sort of mythologies?
No, they were just like Spielberg. They knew my work as well, and we'd been friends before that. They just said, write what you want.
Because, I've read a few novelizations over the years, because that was the sort of way to revisit the films when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I didn't have access to VHS, DVD at the time, obviously.
No DVDs, no streaming. It's like once you saw it in the theater, unless you wanted to shell out another $10 to go see it again.
Yeah.
And then after its first run, it was gone altogether. The only way you could revisit it was with the novelization.
Yeah, or sometimes a comic adaptation.
Yeah.
What do you think sort of separates a competent novelization from a great one then?
I think the ability to look just deeper than what you get in the movie, to use the movie as a prompt, really. You might see something happen in the movie, just a glance or an exchange between two characters that makes you think, well, where did that come from? Why are they saying that? What about their backgrounds or previous relationship led to that? And then the creative process takes over and you make up stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And with Star Wars having sort of remained in the public sphere for decades now, have you found yourself kind of wanting to revisit the stories behind making these novels?
What do you mean?
Well, have you ever felt like you could write a memoir or, have a website, a blog, or I mean,
Oh,
doing an
I
interview like this obviously is
yeah,
part of
yeah.
it.
I just did write a memoir.
Hmm.
Were you aware of that? Did you know that?
I was just leading you into it.
Oh, thanks so much. I
A
appreciate
Jedi
it.
memoir, a double life. Yeah.
Yes, my double life. Yeah. And that was, my kids had been urging me for years to write a memoir just because of all these wild, crazy stories that I had told them growing up, both Hollywood stories and emergency room stories.
Mm.
Uh, and it always seemed like a kind of a measure of hubris. Like, who in the world besides my family would care about my memoirs? Um, but I'm getting older. I'm thinking about my legacy. I'm thinking about, and also interestingly, I had just been going through boxes um, that my father had left me that included oral histories that he had taken from his parents,
Oh wow.
who came over here from Russia in the late 19th century or early 20th century, and they were remarkable, adventurous, intense stories about fleeing the Tsar, they always fascinated me. So I found them again, and I was reminded, how much I love to hear about my grandparents' stories.
Mm.
I'll bet my grandchildren might like to hear about my stories too. And I'm at the stage of my life now where I've got grandchildren now. So I wanted them
Yeah.
to know all these things that my kids already knew, but inevitably my kids would forget about many of or most of.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I started doing interviews and started a podcast, because when my granddad passed away, he was a very good storyteller. We couldn't remember the details, and they were gone,
Yeah,
And
yeah.
my grandmother would say, "Oh no, wasn't it this guy that was involved?" And my mum would say, "No, I'm sure he was there at the time." And I really wish that I'd interviewed him. And we keep saying we're going to get my kids to interview my parents as well, just to kind of get
Yeah,
those
yeah.
stories down,
It's
because they open up slightly differently as well to when there's a generation skip, I
right,
think.
exactly. And when my
Um,
father was first doing this, at that time we kind of rolled our eyes like, "Oh, Dad." But I'm so grateful he did that and got those stories. And even when you mentioned details, the detail that jumped out at me, and I was just telling this story to one of my kids a few weeks ago, was um, Jews in Tsarist Russia were often drafted for 30 years. When they were
right.
drafted, they had to go in the army for 30 years and they were put on the front lines. So my grandfather was taught a trick how to get out of the draft, which is he would jump from a chair to the floor onto one leg repeatedly until he dislocated his hip. And
Holy
then,
hell.
from then on, he was able to dislocate his hip at will. So when he was drafted, he dislocated it and limped in, and they said, "Well, you can't fight," so they sent him away.
Wow. Goodness me. And if that had not been recorded, you'd
Yeah,
never know that, and that
never
story wouldn't
never
have been
know that.
carried forward.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I don't have any stories like that, but I have some pretty interesting stories.
But when I've worked in live television for 26 years now, and I've travelled the world multiple times, and it's not until now that I'm working remotely and I'm sort of back into the not humdrum life, but the less adventurous life. I'm not
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
Singapore, Malaysia, Burma, places
Right,
that I've been.
right.
That I realise how extraordinary a life I've kind of had over those 20 odd years, and how much I know that other people don't know about the
Yeah.
world and
Ex-
those experiences. And everybody's got those experiences,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure, to a certain extent. But I think,
You
if
should
you've
write a memoir.
Yeah, maybe one day I will. I'll
Yeah.
get to a certain point. Maybe I'll look back and, I just from this podcast, I've ended up at Skywalker Ranch and Lucasfilm. I
Yeah.
went to Martha's Vineyard, and I'm making a documentary about production designer that worked for Spielberg at the
Yeah.
moment. All of that has come out of just talking to people on this podcast,
Right.
and just having that passion for it and kind of making your own luck. And that's what I love about your story, is that you always seem to have that ability to, like you said, this is the only chance I'm going to get to speak to Steven Spielberg and ask him this question. Most
Yeah.
people would have said, this is the only chance I'm going to get. I'm not going to do it because I'm going to mess it up.
Yeah,
At
no,
least
exactly.
you had,
I mean, finally I thought, like, well, what's the absolute worst that could happen?
absolutely.
He could say
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would feel embarrassed or humiliated or sorry that I asked. And then
You'd be sore for a few days, and
Yeah,
you'd have a story to tell, like you said. I think
Yeah.
somebody told me once that, A, what's the worst that can happen, and B, nobody else is any better than you are. There's still a human. There's still a connection to be made if you can make it.
And that was also incidentally, and in this memoir, I jump back and forth between emergency room and Hollywood, and that was a lesson I learned while learning how to be a doctor. That there were lots of times where you felt completely up to the task, but you had to just jump in and do it. And overcome that bar of fear, and then afterwards, it was okay.
Yeah, you sort of get to a point, don't you, where you're no longer sort of faking the confidence. It's just sort of there. It arrives at some point without you realizing, almost.
Right,
yeah.
right. You start out feeling like a charade.
Yeah.
And it comes together.
And then suddenly you're the old guy, teaching the
right,
young
exactly.
ones,
Well,
yeah.
That's
what's happening to
the
me.
axiom in the emergency room was watch one, do one, teach one.
Right. Nice. So where can people get hold of My Jedi Memoir, A Double Life?
Yeah, until last week on Amazon, and there's some kind of techno glitch, so it's the page is down for about a week or so.
Right.
But if you just wait a week or two, it'll be up on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and the publisher's website, which is Bear Manor Media.
Great. All right. Well, I'll make sure I leave those links in the show notes, because I'm sure by the time I put this out, the page will be back up and running. Thanks so much for making time to chat to us, because I know, as soon as I had mentioned on my social media that I was talking to you, people were like, oh, wow, I love his books and they mean so much to me. And they're sending me pictures of their shelves full of books, of movie tie-ins. And
I know. And I've had that I don't do cons a lot, conventions. But when I have gone to sign books, there's a line of people waiting for me to sign Jedi. And they all say the same thing, how important this book was to them growing up. They kept it under their pillow and they learned how to read with it. And the pages fell out by the time they were finished reading it. So it was very
what a great legacy to have.
Yeah. It was really very moving to me.
That was James Kahn. What a treat to finally get to speak with him. As I said at the top of the interview, it was very on and off for a while. I had clashes in my personal life with the interview dates that we'd set, but we finally did it. I'm glad we finally did it. And it was great, to dive back into those books again after all these years. I loved hearing about how he took those iconic scripts and expanded them into something deeper and more personal, and how his additions, like Ben and Owen being brothers, or the Wookiee-Ewok connection, lived in fans' heads for decades. They really did. If you enjoyed the chat and you're a regular listener, I'd be hugely grateful if you could support the podcast on Patreon. Every episode takes time to research, record, edit and release, and your support directly helps me keep making these conversations happen. So think of it as a way of saying, I value your work, Jamie. Please keep going, because otherwise, I don't know if people are enjoying it. I hope they are. Anyway, you can find the link at patreon.com/Jamie Benning. And don't forget about the YouTube channel, the Filmumentaries YouTube channel, where I've been posting some videos recently, some snippets of these podcasts, some extra little bits and bobs that I've collected over the years. I'll be back soon, jabbering on with another behind-the-scenes artist. Until then, thanks so much for listening, and I hope you can do so for the next episode of the Filmumentaries Podcast.
we are getting way